Hey, how's it going everyone? I hope you're all having an amazing day so far and welcome back to another edition of Which Game is Better. Just in case you're new to the series, basically what I do is take two games from similar genres and compare them based on story, gameplay, and the worlds of both games. Whichever game has won the majority of the three categories by the end is in my opinion the better game. Now in this edition we are going to be doing Ghost Recon Wildlands versus Far Cry 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Let's start with the stories in Far Cry 5 and Ghost Recon Wildlands. In my opinion, both games have some pretty boring protagonists. Nomad from Wildlands doesn't display any standout character traits and just isn't very interesting in general. The deputy from Far Cry 5 is also a poor protagonist, however. The character never speaks a word and is just a blank lone wolf killing machine throughout the entire story. So while I don't think Nomad is a good protagonist, he is certainly better than the deputy, who is hardly even a character in my opinion. Now, both games have some fairly interesting plots. In Far Cry 5, the entire area of Hope County, Montana has been taken over by a religious cult led under the leadership of Joseph Seed. While in Wildlands, the entire country of Bolivia has been taken over by a drug cartel that has even enlisted the help of the Bolivian armed forces in Unidad. These plots are actually fairly similar as both involve some large evil force taking over a region, or in Wildlands' case, a country, and the protagonist and his squad or team is sent in to liberate the region and arrest the evil leaders. Both games also use fairly similar mission structures in which you have to work your way through the chain of command, taking down all the side villains. Personally, I think Wildlands did a much better job of executing the system as opposed to Far Cry 5. In Wildlands, they give you total freedom in choosing your targets and exploiting their various weaknesses. There are also way more side villains to take care of than in Far Cry 5, leaving Wildlands with overall just more substance and length when it comes to the story. I also really hate Far Cry 5's repetitive system in which you get kidnapped from the world and enter a linear story thread. It happens over and over again, and it becomes extremely overdone and boring by the second region. Now don't get me wrong, Wildlands' system of constant intel missions and story missions is also very repetitive, but they do a better job of giving you more intriguing missions that all have different side stories attached with them. Now arguably the two strongest parts of each Wildlands and Far Cry 5 story are their main antagonists. El Sueño from Wildlands was a very intimidating and scary villain that made you feel like you were fighting an impossible battle, while Joseph Seed was a more cunning and soft-spoken villain who made you doubt if you were even fighting for the right side. If I had to choose a better villain between these two, I would have to say Joseph Seed, mainly because El Sueño wasn't very layered and he had hardly any screen time in the game. However, having a slightly better villain doesn't make this game's story better than Wildlands in my opinion. Wildlands' story just overall did a better job of immersing me in the world, and its concept and execution was just handled a lot better in my opinion. And while the story definitely isn't perfect, I believe it is a better story than the story from Far Cry 5, so this category goes to Ghost Recon Wildlands. Let's now compare the gameplay between Wildlands and Far Cry 5. For starters, I just want to throw out there that I think both games could definitely use some spicing up when it comes to gameplay. While in open combat in both games, the shooting feels very plain and gets old after a while. Both games have their fair share of explosives and gadgets, but in the end, it's all pretty basic. I will say Far Cry 5 has a slight edge here because the weapons have a lot more variety and all have their different purposes. For example, Far Cry 5 has flamethrowers and a bow and arrow along with throwing knives and melee weapons that give a little more flair and variety to the gameplay. The stealth in these two games are also pretty basic. They both pretty much only use shoot and melee kills. The one thing that really separates them a little more is the AI teammates from Wildlands, which they have sync shot, which is very fun to use. While Far Cry 5 has a system similar to this with guns for hire, I don't think it's quite nearly as good. However, Wildlands does have some big issues with its stealth. For starters, there are no ragdolls for dead enemies, so when you kill someone, their body is just immovable and will just vanish out of thin air pretty quickly, which breaks some immersion. The AI also aren't great. If they see one of their dead pals, they will run to your exact position, which makes no sense, and then they will ring the alarm and you'll have a whole army on your hands, which could have been avoided if you could just move the body. Far Cry 5 doesn't have a perfect AI, especially once you're spotted, but you have a lot more control over how the stealth missions play out. Both games have pretty poor driving. I do think Far Cry 5 is better, but let's be real, it's bad in both games. Overall, both games aren't fantastic in gameplay, but this category is going to go to Far Cry 5 for its more smooth and somewhat more varied combat and stealth. We are tied up at 1-1, and that leaves a tiebreaker headed into the final category, which is the open worlds. Now, if you have played both games, you likely know where I'm going with this, as I think this category is a no-brainer, but I'm going to explain why. For starters, the environments. Far Cry 5 takes place in Montana, as I'm sure we all know, and the world itself looks great and everything, but is severely lacking in variety. 90% of the map is just open stretches of field with nothing on them, while in Bolivia from Wildlands, there's some great variety. Jungles, streams, snowy mountains, frozen lakes, hilly grasslands, and frozen tundras. Wildlands also does a much better job at making you feel immersed in its world. Its map is so much more lively than Far Cry 5. Wildlands has lots of civilians that all have a set day and night cycle that cycles through them driving to sleeping and even eating. It makes you feel like you're actually in Bolivia, and while there are some civilians in Far Cry 5, there is nowhere near the same amount, and you'll usually just see them sitting and doing nothing in the open world. Both games, however, have small things like car radios that increase immersion. However, in Wildlands, since you are with a squad, you can hear constant communication from Nomad to his squad, and it can be anywhere from jokes to pointing out cool sights and landmarks. And again, in Far Cry 5, your character never talks, so driving from point A to point B is just a silent car ride. So what I am saying is, Wildlands world is a beautifully varied country brimming with life, while Far Cry 5 is a lonely and dull world of just fields and more fields. So Wildlands win this one by a landslide, leaving our final score at Wildlands 2 and Far Cry 5 1. So in my opinion, Ghost Recon Wildlands is a better game than Far Cry 5. Now obviously you don't have to agree, and if you think Far Cry 5 is a better game, then I would like to see why in the comments down below, and we can all discuss it. If this video helped you in any way, or you found it just a little entertaining, a like on the video and a subscribe would be very much appreciated. We just hit 2,000 subscribers, which I cannot believe we hit so quickly. So again, thank you to all of you who subscribed, and we are going to go far with this channel. If you're interested in playing co-op for either Ghost Recon Wildlands or Far Cry 5, we're going to be hosting co-op live streams soon over on my Discord server where you can play with me and others. So if that's something that may sound interesting to you, feel free to click the link below. Anyways, that'll be it for today's video, and have a great rest of your day, assassins.